means this preliminary vote approving this bill?
The vote was along party lines, 4 hours late. It's been a very heated night in the parliament, but it was literally 64 to 56, which is how this parliament divides. And it's the first reading speech, and the word of the night is reasonable. If the second and third reading speeches also pass, then the courts will no longer be able to look into appointments, firings, hirings that are on the grounds that they're not reasonable. So if, let's say, a minister wants to appoint a relative, you could have gone to the court before and said that's not a reasonable appointment. You haven't got that option anymore. And it's not just the parliament, by the way, it's municipalities and others too. And it is the same section of the reforms. You know, we did hear from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu there were going to be compromises. This is exactly as it was proposed 6 months ago. The only difference now is that it's being done in slices. I think they've realised, some of them have actually said so, the opposition has said so all along, that they couldn't pass it in one big lot, so they're going to slice it up, and this is slice it and dice it, and this is the first slice, the first reading speech of the first slice.
Okay, sliced and diced, the preliminary vote goes through, it's approved. Clearly, as you're describing it, one sees the door opens now to cronyism, one might even say gangsterism. Maybe that's too far, I don't know, you can correct me. But there's been much discussion about Netanyahu wanting to change the rules of the judiciary to protect himself. Is that still the case?
That's one of the arguments that's made. I have heard politicians saying, Likud politicians saying, that as soon as this goes through, they're going to fire the Attorney General. And part of the reason for firing the Attorney General is that they think they don't like her. They think she's too soft. She's too soft on the protesters. She hasn't got their interests at heart, as they see it. And also, she isn't willing to negotiate a plea deal for Benjamin Netanyahu. So it could be one factor, you're right. And, you know, there is a concern with many Israelis, many of the opponents of this bill, and they do cross party lines, there is a concern that it's actually going to change Israeli democracy. So it's going to benefit a politician like Benjamin Netanyahu, who's in legal trouble himself, but it's also going to allow other people to take further steps that may not be to the benefit of the public. And what we heard the Justice Minister saying tonight is if we do the wrong thing, then, you know, the people can punish us at the next election. But it's 4 years between elections. You can do a lot in that time before the public has a right to have its say again.
Indeed. And you've covered for us the multiple elections that have taken place in Israel over the past few years, on many occasions. Things being so tight, governments couldn't be formed. This is all added into the problem, I imagine. And it's unusual to see, as we have seen, and as you have reported on, mass demonstrations across the country against these reforms.
That's right. I think if you look a little bit deeper, what you're seeing is that it's about the composition of what Israel will look like. There's a feeling and a fear amongst most Israelis that I've spoken to, from the parliament down to the streets, that this is now a right-wing religious government. Many of them are not Democrats in the sense of people who believe in democracy, and that they're trying to imprint themselves and to alter Israel's democracy because they don't care about democracy. Those freedoms aren't important to them. Their religious views are important to them. And because of that, they see this change in Israel coming. And that's why there's been this passion around this. And I heard the Justice Minister once again saying what he has said all along, that this is about taking back control, giving more power to the parliament. No one can be above the parliament, he says, not even judges. Well, you know, that's not the democracy that I learned at school, but it's very clearly the democracy he wants. So he's one prong of it. The religious views are another prong. And I think that's why you're seeing these passions.
People, politicians, parties trying to protect their own interests, basically.
Yes, trying to protect their own interests. He has, this particular Justice Minister, Yariv Levin, has a philosophy I don't really comprehend. You know, you could say, he says that he was a lone voice 20 years ago making these points, but that now Benjamin Netanyahu allowed him to. And opponents of Benjamin Netanyahu, a very strong Prime Minister, they say that it's his own legal troubles that have led him to form this particular right-wing government and to allow everybody has their own reasons. Each party has their own reasons for wanting to limit the power of Israel's Supreme Court. I just have to remind you, there's no constitution here. There's no upper house. It's a very, very powerful parliament. It merges with the executive, and they don't want to be stopped by the judiciary, which is really the only brake on their power.